just continue to roll with the changes and stay positive throughout. And if the people can't stay positive with you, then maybe they're not part of the business at the time.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Sara Beech, who is currently the Director of Sales at Trainual. She leads the company's sales strategies, helping businesses streamline their onboarding and training processes with innovative software solutions. With a strong background in sales leadership, Sara plays a pivotal role in driving customer acquisition and implementing AI-driven approaches to scale Trainual's growth, which is why we're excited to have her on the show. Sara, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Devin.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. I'm really excited to get into some of the stuff that you're doing with Trainual. I personally have had some experience with Trainual. I think it's a really incredible platform, which is also part of why we wanted to reach out and speak to you and get some of your insight. But before we get too far into it, Sara, I'd love to just start with a quick little background on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed as the director of sales at Trainual.
Yeah, totally. My career has kind of been a little bit all over the place. I started off like in college. I went to school for interior design, and here I am working for a SaaS startup and growing that. But I would say my career naturally kind of fell into more of a sales realm. Being in the service industry, I was cocktailing and waitressing, and really was able to connect with people and giving them a great experience when they were, coming into the restaurant. And I feel like by nature, it was just a really easy way to just connect with people and help them have a better experience. And over time, I joined another startup that was in logistics, and it was shipping. We were basically like matching freight to carriers that were over the road. And I quickly kind of caught on to that and grew my book of business very, very rapidly. Was the first sales rep there, and just really kind of like loved connecting to the blue collar workers and just helping them, make their operations more efficiently, and then also just building those relationships in order to maintain, a positive, experience while they were, dealing with a lot of overhead. Um, and for Trainual, just in general, it was something that I was kind of at a pivotal point in my career. I was looking to make a change. I had built up this big book of business with my past life being in logistics, and I was just kind of looking for what my next role would look like. And ironically, the company that I was working for was one of the really early adopters of Trainual before it kind of was like fully released to the public. So I had firsthand experience with seeing like the magic of using like an efficient training and onboarding solution that came into my previous employer. And we were doing like a lot of manual processes. And you can imagine like, a shipping container, a trailer, so many different, components that had to be taught very manually. And we did a lot of like classroom training. And it would take people like weeks, close to over a month to be like fully productive in their role. Once we implemented Trainual, I wasn't obviously mainly a part of the training process because I was in sales, but for the operations people, I got to see firsthand how quickly they got up and running into their roles and quickly in dispatch and getting onto on the phones and helping our customers, drive more efficiency through that. So that was kind of my first initial experience with seeing that type of solution. And when I was looking for the next step in my career, I had a mentor that was like, "Hey, this company looks really cool. They're growing. Looks like they don't really have any salespeople. I know the founder." And so I was like, "That's really interesting because we use Trainual." And I connected with Chris on LinkedIn, Chris Rounzio, who is our founder, and met at a coffee shop. There was only like 5 people that were there at the time. And so I accepted the position as the first sales rep, technically in business development, and the rest is kind of history from there. So that was back in 2018.
Wow, okay, so you've been with them since 2018, and over the time there, I imagine that some of the work that you do has kind of evolved. I know, from that initial onset, you mentioned early that you kind of developed a pretty heavy book of business. These are people that you've been networking. Relationships seems to be really important to you. Did you bring some of that with you over into the new role in the early stages, and how has that kind of evolved since you've been there?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, in general, the relationships that I had, I mean, I feel like I had the inside knowledge of how a lot of these businesses were operating very inefficiently. And it was also a very high turnover industry. So there were some of those businesses that were able to obviously use Trainual as a platform, but it was different for me because I was coming from a very like high volume outbound like selling position. So being an individual contributor and then knowing that there was something more in this career path when I joined Trainual that I still had something to prove. But when I heard that we were mainly an inbound model, I was like, that's like, I didn't even know that existed at the time in 2018, like I think HubSpot was kind of the company that coined inbounding. But I was like, wait, people like actually like are raising their hand wanting to talk to me. Like, this is amazing because previously I was doing a lot of outbound sales and trying to, make something out of thin air and trying to build that rapport. And so at Trainual, it was kind of a big pivot of thinking about how you could actually, help people who are raising their hand, help them, talk through some of their, initial pain points and then value match those solutions with what you have to offer, and supporting them and getting started. So that's probably a good tidbit on how, that transition actually happened. And again, it was definitely a big shock, but it was a really cool opportunity for me to kind of do something very unique and different.
So there's this major shift from the outbound efforts of going out and having to shake hands and meet people and I don't know maybe what that looked like for you if it was events or if this was like going to places of business and doing that sort of
All of
thing.
the above.
Okay, so yeah, then you're really out there. You're really on the front lines in the field,
Mhm.
in the mud, making a difference. And then you get to train you, and all of a sudden people are coming to you, and that must have been a really interesting shift. Can you talk to what some of the what those experiences were like in terms of like the different level of skill that it takes to speak to people from both of these different frames?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say, you're kind of doing more of the talking when you're doing outbound, right? You're trying to kind of like initially trigger some pain points, but the inbound model is beautiful, knowing that you have an incredible marketing, organization that's obviously brought these people to come to you that are raising their hand for something, and your marketing had obviously triggered them to say like, I'm really interested in what solution you offer, like tell me more. Um, but I would definitely say, there's still a very similar component, and we're talking, there's a lot of like foundational elements with sales. And I feel like there's not always like a right size fits all, but there is a very foundational piece of being able to show up prepared on your conversations. And that's really basic, but I think it's really important. Like when you're showing up for those conversations, even though those people actually booked time on your calendar, it's about doing your due diligence and really making sure that like you're able to kind of speak to that particular industry, those pain points. I mean, I was doing demos within like my first 2 weeks of starting at Trainual back in 2018. And admittedly, like I didn't really know like a ton of things about the product, but I quickly was able to adapt by just being curious about these companies and understanding their kind of their operations and what they were looking for. Obviously, without having AI, you have Google that you could go back and look into and just be intentional about their website and their LinkedIn profile, but just understanding a little bit more about what that type of business was, really kind of help like have that type of conversation and just making sure that, the solution is something that they would be willing to see if they would give it a shot to help. And at the time, we were very like focused on, product led, motion where it wasn't necessarily a lot was coming through sales. A lot of people were signing up for trials and converting from there. And over the years, it's kind of been a big shift just because we've added so much to the product. And so sales now is at the front lines of some of those marketing efforts because, people want to know how they can match that to their business needs.
Okay, so there's two things actually that you mentioned I want to dig into. So the first one, in outbound, there is this necessity to do a deep, deep level of research on somebody before you even think of picking up the phone or reaching out to that person. And that gives you the tools and the ammo that you need to like help
There's
talk to that person and a lot there's a buzzword that's kind of going around the sales world right now, which is like a lot of sales is just change management. So there's a change that needs to happen, and you just need to find out how you're going to help them manage that change into your product being the solution that they need. On the other hand, when people are coming to you, it may seem initially like that research part of it isn't necessarily quite as important because all you're really doing now is just answering questions. But the reality is, I think that you discovered, Sarah, or the thing that you pointed at there was that actually you're still it required almost to do that deep level of research so that when you do show up on that call and they do have those questions, you have the context that you need to make or to help guide that decision making process. Is that accurate to your experience?
Yeah, 100%.
So when you're doing this kind of research, you mentioned early on, we had tools like Google and stuff like that, and even Google's not that great because like 90% of the results that were served are irrelevant and just ads anyways. So what would you say are some of the like key things that somebody should be looking for when they're doing research and they're trying to have these conversations with people to solve problems? So I get that's kind of like really high up, 30,000 foot view, very broad in general versus being specific in industry and stuff. But is there anything that you could offer in terms of like just a framework or a guideline that you follow for that research?
Yeah, I mean, I would say something, super simple. At least know where they're from. Like, where are they calling from? Are they East Coast, West Coast? Like, one thing that drives me absolutely insane is like, you get on the phone with somebody, it's like, oh, where are you calling in from? And it's like, did you not like? There's a lot of information that's readily available for me of my location. So, and if it's just a website that you have, and you may not necessarily like have those details, like even a zip code of a phone number that they input, in their booking field is like you can easily look up like an area code that starts with a three, typically East Coast, and so forth. So very, very basic fundamentals. I think that's really important, just the level set. The other component, obviously, is just the industry that they're in. So, now with AI and ChatGPT, there's just so much that you could, throw in a couple prompts and just say like, based off of training and onboarding, within real estate, what are the typical inefficiencies within an agency or a brokerage? It's really easy just to have a couple pinpoints that are already outlined that give you that ammo out of the gate. The other thing is obviously being in a training type of solution. Glassdoor reviews are really, really helpful with the business. Being on LinkedIn or other, job post boards to see if they're actually hiring or growing their team, I think is really powerful information. But hopefully, just basic 101, but definitely like really important. And I think a lot of people still like don't put the time and effort to do that as much as they absolutely should.
And let this serve as the PSA to those people. It helps when you go a little bit deeper. And okay, so the other thing is on that note, you said earlier, I think that Trainual kind of, yeah, we started out as this idea of like, a training platform, but there's been development of the product and evolution of the product. And so now it's not just the one thing. Now you kind of cover a number of different bases, which points at another really key thing in business development, customer acquisition is sometimes, and most times actually, um, it's easier and more fruitful to go deeper with your current client list and provide more solutions for them versus going wider and trying to acquire more customers. Um, but I think it's important too for businesses to strike a balance between both of those things so that you maximize the opportunities for revenue generation for that business. So in terms of like the customer experience map, because you guys have so many options or different ways of serving your clients, I wonder if maybe you could kind of walk me through what that looks like in terms of like how do people find you once they do and they get into your ecosystem? Like, what does that nurturing look like to get them into that sales call? And then once they're on that sales call, how do you help kind of inspire them into making a decision?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, um, again, kind of going back to us being more of an inbound driven motion, we've definitely, kind of had our foot and our toes deep into a little bit of outbounding approach, but we've really found that like inbound for our business in particular and our marketing efforts have really helped grow our business from the early days. And we really wanted to lean in on that as we, continue to scale over the past, six years plus. Um, I would say just in general, obviously like we're a very quirky brand. Um, and when we hire, like we don't want people that are just very like rigid and just, like dear so and so, like in their emails. We really want to just be, we want people to be able to write like they talk, right? And so I think there's a lot of our marketing nuances that people get excited about because it just feels like more of like a fun brand. And let's face it, like training management, process documentation is not very like much of like a pretty subject.
Well, when you put it like that,
And
Sarah.
I mean, it's not, and people just think it's like this big mountain to climb that it's so hard to do. And I never came from a process documentation background, but it's really easy to, speak from firsthand knowledge, obviously, with my initial story of how I was introduced into Trainual. But the other component is obviously we eat our own dog food, and we use Trainual to train our internal team. And I would be lost if I didn't have that type of system to help my team scale. I mean, I was a team of one, and now we're a team of nearly 16 people. And so it's a lot. But I would say, to answer your question, I know I'm kind of going off topic, but I think there's something that triggers an emotion or a feeling when somebody comes inbound. And it could just be like, lately, if it's just on an Instagram ad or, a Facebook ad or something, and it's just like a meme, but they don't know what it is, but they're really interested to learn more about it because it caught their attention. They'll book a call and meet with one of my team members. We serve a pretty broad range of industries and businesses of any size, but we typically say that like our sweet spot is with businesses that are a little bit more mature and growing. Once you're past kind of like 10 people in the business, it's not as easy to like, say like, hey Devin, how do you do this? Because your business starts growing and things kind of start breaking when you can't like tap somebody on the shoulder because people are out doing other things. And so you need to have more repeatable processes. And so you think about businesses that kind of get closer to like that 10 to 20 mark. They kind of run into a little bit of those inefficiencies. And then obviously we support businesses, 100 plus, with employees. But there's always like some sort of pain point that's like that resonates with those people at the time. And that's where like our inbound efforts work really well. And so having that conversation with people, kind of breaking that down, like how is that actually costing you money when you're having somebody sit down and do these classroom onboarding processes, versus having it actually documented once and having somebody being able to go through it and have everything, tracked for the accountability of them actually learning through that content. And then once we're able to kind of get them acclimated to the system and get them, into our funnel, get them excited about moving forward, we obviously talk through like our support options and our experience team. And I feel like, a lot of people say like that's our differentiator. Like we have an incredible experience team and success team to help support you. But I truly like love to say that like and mean it and actually care about the product that we're offering them to know that it's going to drive solutions, the pain points that they're currently facing. And our success team and support teams are just incredible. There's just a wonderful human element to everything, single thing that they do. We're very intentional with our response times. When people write in over chat, we have a very extensive help doc library that really allows people to kind of be a little bit more self-serve if they're not kind of that type of personality that like want to get on the phone with somebody while they're building out their content. But it is kind of one of those platforms that's like you only get what you put into it. And so, and that's what's so hard, I think, for the initial like conversation is like understanding like, we're building those AI components in it to help make documentation as easy as possible. Like you could create a framework or a smart outline using AI components to help like drive the narrative of what you're trying to build if you're starting from scratch. Obviously, templates and all of that is also included, but in particular, like our implementation process is incredible. For smaller businesses, we have like group onboarding sessions. So it's kind of this like really cool community. Like if you, hit go, this week, then you can start onboarding the next week with same, people starting from the same place at the same time. Obviously, just getting started out with their account in a group, kind of classroom format, webinar style. And then, if you're more of a growing business that needs a little bit more hand holding and needs like somebody one-on-one to kind of walk you through the process, we also have those options to really work with them. Getting some of most of these businesses do have some content, like an employee handbook, and making sure that you have the understanding of how you actually get it into our system. We have a document importer, but I think there's just different ways to go about that. So allowing people kind of the fluidity of what their perfect Trainual account, looks like will be different from somebody else's perfect Trainual account. And so I think that's the benefit and the beauty of having very different processes throughout different business models, but at the same time, having like somewhat of a blueprint to help walk them through that process at the same, pace.
There's something really human about this company that is refreshing. The two things that I really admire is the emphasis on response time. Well, and especially for a product or a service that is or can be mostly self-serve in that if I wanted to, I could go over there, I could sign up, I could get my account, I could get in there, I could tinker around. All the documentation and all the tools and things that you have to guide that process, really, really strong. But then if I get stuck somewhere, which inevitably happens for what I would imagine most, if not all of your clients, and okay, when I get stuck, the decision of me staying with you or going somewhere else or giving up on this idea rests in the hands of somebody answering my question in a timely fashion. Because if I don't get that answer, and I'm sure this is true with most people, if they don't get the answer, they're moving on. They're gonna go somewhere else. And so it's really refreshing to have a business that puts a huge emphasis on that human element of interacting with these solutions that are out there. Um, this has been really great and very insightful. As we kind of come to a close with our time together, I wonder if we could look forward at some of the big goals that you're aiming at, maybe some of the big initiatives that you're kicking off for the top of the 2025 year, Sarah. What are you guys working on?
What are we not working on?
It's a shorter
The
list.
past 2 weeks, yeah, the past 2 weeks have been a lot, and my team has been kind of like my ride or dies, for to put it bluntly. I feel like one of my managers, we were just talking about change is constant, right? That's one thing that we absolutely know in this type of landscape in any business, right? But really making sure that, with a growing business as a startup, like you can't just set something and forget it and just say like this is the way it's going to be. Uh, and I always think back to this like the Friends like pivot meme when they're like taking the mattress and trying to move it up the stairs. It is like the epitome of my we call ourselves our marketing team, so it's sales, marketing, and partnership. Um, so we learn from what we're doing and then we pivot really quickly. And that's what I think is really like the emphasis and how we've like continued to build this beautiful business. But I would say the focus obviously is just, really thinking about how we're setting ourselves up to continue to scale really efficiently going into next year. Being an inbound business model, mainly is really, about optimizing the efficiency of our funnel. And so, even a couple weeks ago, we had some learnings and we were like, okay, need to kind of like pull back in some of these areas. We need to get more efficient of how we're managing our pipeline. So we use HubSpot as our CRM, and just like live, breathe everything HubSpot as far as like workflows and data properties, um, you know, deal pipeline mapping to, different partnership deals and attribution. But putting those components in place to really set us up for like full success going into next year, considering the fact that we have so many moving pieces right now and trying to like pull back on speed in order to sacrifice on, pushing for more efficiency throughout going into 2025 is really kind of like the main focus. Obviously, aside from that, training and onboarding tool and solution, we're always like onboarding and hiring people. So and over the next this in October, we have two new onboarding cohorts that we're also prepping for. And so really wanted to make sure that, with those small tweaks and iterations of how we change, we're also changing our documentation to help support those to be fully successful. And what they're intent and what they're supposed to be doing, and also make sure that they're set up with the tools that they need access to in order to be to ramp, going into the beginning of the year. So right now, a team of 11 sellers will end this month probably closer to like 13, maybe 14 sellers. And so with that said, like going into next year, trying to really think about what the team will look like even ending in 2025, because you can never be too far ahead of just making sure that you're growing the team and optimizing where you need to in order to achieve the goals of the business.
Yeah, that keeping a keen eye on the horizon and staying apprised to opportunity is a huge skill, and one that not a lot of businesses or business owners have. And it's crazy because when you come from the perspective of what got you here isn't what's going to get you there, it becomes really
Exactly.
obvious that there's work that needs to be done, and there's never any rest for the wicked, as it seems. So how do you keep track of this in a way that you know that what you guys are doing is effective? What are the key milestones that you guys keep an eye on? Maybe some of the metrics, revenue. What are you guys aiming at?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about efficiency, it's obviously conversion rates, right? So
Mhm.
the more you hire, you have new people that are coming in, those conversion rates could dip a little bit just based off of not having the full experience. So really keeping a good pulse on that.
Mhm.
Obviously, net new, revenue that's coming through the business. Like we've just released some add-ons that are part of, current customers and allowing them to upgrade and to try new features that we're launching within the platform instead of making it, just, part of the current plan that they're in. So that's been new for us. Like we've never had add-ons as a component or a leverage to continue to grow revenue while we continue to invest into the product. And it also helps on the front line of sales, right? And so allowing us to have, more levers to pull, I think, to allow people to, I don't know, basically customize what they want to get into. And so obviously for the sales team, we focus on the new monthly recurring revenue that's coming in as a main business metric. So yeah, I think managing to that, and then overall just like headcount versus, efficiency within the business, the multiples there that you're paying attention to along the way. And one thing I didn't mention is that we every year we do like this big event. So we're gearing up for Playbook 2024. You can go to playbook.trainual.com. It's actually going to be in person for the first time ever here in Phoenix, Arizona. We've done it virtually for the past like 4 years, but we have a ton of speakers that are coming from all over the nation. And it's a way for us to like host like our customers, like to come in and share best practices and network, learn from other business coaches that were within our community. And it's really cool to get some face time with those people. So I think like when I think about like measuring success, obviously there's all these beautiful business metrics that everybody's trying to pay attention to, and ARPA and MRR and ARR and so forth. But I think having an event like that and having it become successful because you're offering that to your customers and for the first time in person, I think is also like a really big win to close out the end of the year.
Yeah, that's really exciting. To be able to bring together such a colorful group of people. As you were talking, I was just looking at some of the guests and speakers and things like that. There's some pretty big names there. I'm sure that's going to be quite an experience for anybody that does end up going there. Listen, Sarah, this has been wonderful. You've been very generous with your time and your wisdom and insight, and for that, I'm very grateful. As we close out the show, I wonder if we could leave on this. If there's somebody else out there who's up to it, trying to create something or testing and trial and error and in the trenches trying to make something happen and they're facing challenges, what sort of advice might you offer them to keep them going through it?
Just continue to roll with the changes and stay positive throughout. And if the people can't stay positive with you, then maybe they're not part of the business at the time. It doesn't make sense for them, and that's okay. Change is constant. It will always be something that's inevitable and in business. And I think the more that you can surround your people that embrace that, the better off you will be as a business and as your own department as you're growing that.
Really, really powerful. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn, you can find me at Sara Beech. That's a great way to connect with me. And then you can reach out to me over email, Sarah, Sara at Trainual.com. Happy to have a conversation as well.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so that anybody listening or watching will be able to find you easily. And on that note, if you wanted to reach out to me and my team for any of your marketing or AI needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and I will see you in the next.